Welcome to the Path and Purpose podcast, where we explore the journey of living and leading from your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Cameron Martin. As a spiritual coach and leader, I've dedicated my life to helping changemakers, creatives, and conscious leaders align with their soul's calling. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of those who are paving the way for a more conscious and compassionate world. My purpose is to explore the intersection of spirituality and leadership, offering you practical insights and inspiration to live and lead with authenticity. Join me as we discover how to embrace our soul gifts, overcome barriers, and learn to lead from being. This podcast will inspire you to live in alignment with your soul's purpose and create a lasting impact, one conversation at a time. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. I'm excited to have you here with me. And on today's show, I'm excited to share space with Jorge Perez. Jorge is an author, agent, producer, and keynote speaker. He's been in the personal development and entertainment industry for over 20 years. He's the host of the Outliers TV podcast and has created TV shows for networks like Bravo. He's also an award-winning documentary filmmaker about the homeless epidemic in Los Angeles. Honestly, that's just part of his list. Jorge has many creative outlets and many things that he's been up to, and you'll find out more in the episode. But I'm really excited to share this space with him. Now, I'll note that our conversation was recorded in mid-May of 2024, and Jorge shares about his book that was released in June of 2020. So this book is actually called The Shut the Fuck Up Method: Silence the Way to the Life of Your Dreams. And so we talk quite a bit about the inspiration for the book. And since its launch, it's actually been an Amazon #1 bestseller, actually right at the very beginning. I saw the results of that. So it's very exciting to share this conversation with you today about what inspired this book. And of course, you can grab yourself a copy of it if you feel aligned. But I'm excited to share with you this conversation with Jorge. I really enjoyed it for so many reasons. But in particular, this idea, and actually there's lots of things in the episode worth sharing, but in particular, this idea of how can we silence ourselves enough to become very much aware of the stories that we're telling ourselves and the stories that are running our lives. Because the ways in which we observe the world around us affect how we create our reality. And in a world where there's a lot of pushing and shoving and trying to force to make things happen, Jorge gives us an opportunity to really pause and actually see the benefit of pause and seeing what the sacred space pause actually allows us to do. And so we speak together about mindfulness, and I would go so far as to say being centeredness, which is essentially the tenets of my teaching. How do we connect with our being, with the source of that which we really are, to allow that to come through us? And as Jorge will share, it comes from silence. He shares a lot of nuggets, but in particular, the power of our stories and how our stories that we're telling ourselves actually create the reality, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us and the people that we're interacting with. And so he shares really a calling for all of us to become very mindful of what it is that we're creating through our thoughts and through our stories and through the stories that we tell other people. Him and I share quite a bit about being responsible for the spaces that we create. And I refer to these spaces as being spaces. What is between us, the energetics between me and you as you're listening to this episode, between him and I as we have our conversation, between you and the people in your lives? What is actually being created energetically through your thoughts, through your words, through your actions between us? And how can you take responsibility for that? Because when we do that, we become more powerful creators of our realities. We're always creating, whether we're aware of it or not. But this conversation today hopefully will inspire you to connect with the more intentional creator that you are. We also talk a lot about the power of observation and how we truly do create our realities through our observation of the world around us. I'm happy to have you here with me as I share this conversation with Jorge Perez. Welcome, Jorge.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Excited to speak with you, Cameron.
Absolutely. I'm excited to open this conversation up. And in season two of the show, I'm starting episodes with taking a little peek at my guests' birth charts. So you provided that information to me here. So I'll share a few things. Um,
Can't wait.
so taking a look at your birth chart, you have a pretty strong signature in Libra. And what I mean by that is you have four planets in the sign of Libra. So Libra is a sign that's all about relationships, finding balance, connecting with self and other. There's a pretty strong theme in your life around, you actually have a very strong sense of self. But learning about yourself through relationships, through others, through the mirror of others is an important theme for you, especially in finding your personal power that way. Um, and there is something, you have Mercury in the same sign. So, in terms of creating conversations, you like to have other people, a partner, somebody to think about, talk about. So, this episode may be really great because we have the opportunity for us to talk and share. But this is something that is natural for you in your work. We'll talk about this, but your midheaven is ruled by Sagittarius, which is a sign that's all about higher learning, higher thinking, different perspectives. This is a sign connected to foreigners, travel, religion and philosophy, publishing, writing, speaking. And I know that professionally you've done many things. And so this is probably, you'll share, of course, but your midheaven would suggest that for sure you probably do a lot of things professionally, but the big picture is sharing of ideas, sharing of your knowledge, sharing of your wisdom and philosophy um, with
So
others.
that shows up as the main thing.
It's one thing. I'm not doing a whole reading here, but when I just look at your chart real quick, it popped up pretty quickly.
That's crazy.
Um, you are deeply intuitive as well, and part of really what you're sharing through your messages, of which there are many, is sort of your intuitive nature, maybe a spiritual, creative, artistic nature as well. There's much more I could say, but how do we do?
Pretty good. Pretty good. What number should I play on the lotto?
Yeah, if only it was that easy,
Oh,
right?
that's the only numbers I want.
Well, yeah, we could totally look at a future chart reading, but generally the lottery numbers don't come through. It's not a crystal ball.
It's so funny. In I think it was in December, I went to this charity gala for Project Angel Food, and they were doing like a raffle for like a $15,000 trip to Mexico, and some like a inner knowing came to me and said, "You're gonna win this." Like it was like a knowing. So I bought three raffle tickets, and the first ticket was 96, which I'll age myself is when I graduated high school. So anyway, so I took the number, and but I knew it. It was like this is the winning number. And then the guy got up there, and as he was about to read it, I knew it. He just said 96. So I got the trip, and I went on the thing, and I said I knew that this was the winning number. And what's the name of that psychic, the blonde kid,
Hmm.
Tyler Henry?
Hmm.
Tyler Henry? So Tyler Henry was in the audience when I got up and won my ticket. And after I said I knew I was gonna win this, everybody was like really. It was like a weird moment. Everybody was like, "Okay, that's great." And then I said, "So Tyler Henry, I'm coming for your job, bro."
And I walked off and enjoyed the trip.
I'm going on that trip next month. But I kept playing like I did play the lotto like a week after, and I tried to redoing how I felt about that ticket, but it
Well,
didn't work.
that's okay. That sounds like that was a moment of inspiration for sure. And
That was
maybe
that
this
was
is where we can start the conversation. So let's talk about a little bit of your intuition. Have you always been someone that has been kind of connected to your intuition and tapped in that way, or was that a rare moment for you?
You know what? I mean, it was a great. I have well, I have been winning a lot of
Okay.
bingo lately. Uh, this place where I go, where like now I'm getting a reputation where people are like, "Oh, here he comes again." I don't know. I've been very blessed with. I think I've mainly made some really good choices. I mean, all choices are good, right? They lead us where we're supposed to be. But I think I've always had a pretty good. gut feeling about decisions and things that I should make that have put me on the right path. Um, so I definitely think that I do have that intuition factor going
Mm.
for sure.
Well, let's take us back. We'll start your story here a little bit. Can you share sort of the beginning of your spiritual journey and your awakening spiritually? What was that like for you?
I think it goes back to like when I was 14. My mom was going through a separation from my dad in Venezuela, and I had just moved to the U.S. around when I was 2 years prior, and we were living in New Jersey because my sister is a concert pianist and her teacher lived there, and my mom, I think, to deal with the sadness of the separation, she started really getting into metaphysics, and she got me into pretty much. I got certified with Reiki when I was 14, and my sister was 16, and I did it for a while, and I still do it once in a while when I have like a big pain somewhere. I'm like, but I think that maybe that was the journey, it started the journey into that sensibility of personal introspection. I think I was always that guy that would get really philosophical after like 3 4 beers, where like people would gather around, and I think just the beer made it extra philosophical. But I remember I was that guy in high school, and then when I turned 20, my mom was really into this guy Sai Baba. I don't know if you
Mhm.
know who he is. For you I mean viewers that don't know, this is
Mm.
Sai Baba. He's an Indian guru who passed away. But anyway, so I went to see him when I was 20, and I stayed at the ashram for a month. And while I was there, I got a really bad intestinal infection, which I have never been through worse physical pain in my life. And supposedly, while you're there, you filter karma through
Sure.
physical pain. So I must have been ready to go to hell. It was like maybe this trip is what saved me because I've never felt. But during that trip, though, my mom did have a Tony Robbins book with her, and I remember I couldn't do anything but just open my eyes and maybe read. So I started reading the Tony book, and it blew my mind. I didn't know that there was such a thing as you know. Like whether it was a motivational speaker or that kind of self-help guru type of thing. So I got really into it, and uh, after that, it kind of colored my whole path. I've studied with Byron Katie, with Marianne Williamson, with Tony, obviously. So I've done a Course of Miracles, Dianetics, Landmark. So I've always had a passion for introspection and personal work.
Beautiful. And really, that kind of stemmed from childhood, from your home, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's funny because now I recently got. By the way, this is great that we're doing this in my office because I have all my toys. So my mom was really into this woman. You should look into her. Her name was Connie Mendez. Connie Mendez. So she was like a mystic from Venezuela. But reading it now, I was reading one of these books the other day. Is like everything that I wrote in my book, everything that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about is so aligned with what this
Mhm.
mystic said, and it's fascinating. It's almost like it's the information. It's just we're all doing our own type of recycling, but it's the same. You
Well,
know,
we all are
it's
of one consciousness, right? Oneness
yeah,
is the
yeah,
universal truth. And so, yeah, we get
yeah.
different perspectives of it, thing like that. I was actually just this weekend at a retreat. This past weekend, I was on a retreat with Aaron Abke. Beautiful, amazing experience. It's funny you dropped all those names because they were all pieces of the weekend together. And Byron Katie, in particular, he was speaking about one of the examples that she had, one of her teachings. I guess she was at gunpoint or held at gunpoint at one point. Have you heard
Uh-huh,
about this? Yeah.
uh-huh,
And then,
uh-huh.
for most people,
Yeah,
the experience of being held at gunpoint would be like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I got to run, drop into fear, right? Lower your state of consciousness. But where she was in her own state of consciousness, her natural response was more like, you don't want to do that. and I have compassion for you, right? As a being, as a brother, I can see that you're clearly somebody who's moving through some sort of turmoil, right? But her response was out of love. And then the guy was like, whoa,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this, and like left, right? Maybe you've heard a different version of this story. I'm sort of remembering a piece of it.
Yeah, but that sounds like a very Byron Katie move. She's my, I dedicate the book. The two influential people, and we'll talk. Obviously, we're going to talk about the book, but I just wrote this book, and the book, as far as like my mentors, it's Dr. Joe Dispenza and Byron Katie. I mean, Byron Katie, she was my first
Mhm.
love for sure. I did the school back in 2002. I did her the School of the Work in New York City. Then my mom did the School of the Work. Then I was staff in the School of the Work. So she's just an amazing
Yeah,
woman.
it's beautiful. And it's really beautiful when we have those teachers as well who are like kind of anchors for us along our journey. So those two were important for you. Also, there were a number of other things you shared. Landmark was big for me. In fact, Sunday night
Yeah,
at the
that's
forum was when I
awesome.
had my spiritual awakening, like full
Wow.
on had the experience that the yogis speak of samadhi and no mind and no thought and just total bliss and oneness with all that is. And I remember that evening, I was like, oh my God, well, before my ego came back, but I remember when I was like, I figured it out. This is life. This is reality, this bliss, this ease, this oneness, this I am you and you are me. And I remember going to dinner that night. It was objectively a very bad, like make your own salad restaurant, like one of those, whatever.
Yeah, I know them
And
very well.
but
Right
it
on.
wasn't it wasn't nothing special, but I remember thinking this was the best meal of my entire life. Like every chew, every bit, every person around me, all oneness and bliss. And I was like, this is incredible. And then, ego came back probably 24 hours later, right? I came crashing back down to earth and was like, dang. But I remember after that experience that showed up for me in my life at that time in 2019, it was very clear that I was on a, I mean, I've always known that I'm on a spiritual path, but it was very clear that I was here on this planet for a divine purpose to share and support others in their spiritual journeys. Because it was like, here you go, you got a taste of truth, right? Oneness, this natural state of being that you are, and now you can go share it.
Wow, that's beautiful though. That I think that's it, right? I think we're all on that path, whether we are conscious of it or
Mhm.
not, to help the flock.
Hey there. If you're enjoying what we're diving into here on the podcast and want to go deeper, I want to invite you to check out the Soul Purpose Collective. The Soul Purpose Collective is my online community where like minded changemakers, creatives, and leaders come together to explore what it takes to align and lead from their soul's purpose. Head over to yourpathandpurpose.com/SPC for more details. We'd love to have you join us. And so, would it be fair to say that you've been on this conscious path then ever since you were young?
Yeah, I think so. I've always kind of flirted with the idea of, after I did the work with Byron Katie again in 2002, I was like, oh my God, I want to be a facilitator of it. And I lived in New York City, and I would go in these cancer centers and do the work on cancer patients, and sometimes we would have these magical, like mind blowing sessions, and but then the idea of turning it into a business just always kind of like, I was like, well, I don't know. And then it was more like a personal. It was always kept as a personal
Mm-hmm.
passion, you know, and nothing wrong with that. That's been beautiful, and I think what really ignited um, turning it into what it's becoming, right? Which is, I just finished writing a book that's coming out June 8th called The Shut the Fuck Up Method. Was that I got really deep in, both my parents passed from cancer, my dad in 2019 and my mom in 2022. And I got really into epigenetics, which is a study of how um, stress affects our genetics, essentially, right? What detonates cancer, right? I got very curious about why did both of my parents, they didn't have really cancer history. Why did they develop cancer? And after much digging, I did find out that, when the human body is in a constant state of stress or fight or flight, it could detonate your genetic predispositions. It's that wear and tear of the emotional stress. And I think, and I distinctly remember my father being really enraged with what happened in Venezuela with his business, and my mom, she never got over the divorce and trauma, and we all have trauma, right? And it's not a science, actually. You could be like the angriest person that's 130 that you're like, why are you still around? I mean, you can beat all the scientific proof, right, of what can kill you or not. But something in my gut was like, okay, I as an homage to them, and to continue my mom's legacy, because she was very spiritual. I wanted to put this book out. And the other thing that really detonated is I started doing a lot of volunteering with Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I started just noticing, like, oh my God, people, whether there were participants or some members from, from the organization, like the complaining and the bitching. And I was like, then it started as a joke. I was like, if I ever write a spiritual book, it's going to be called Shut the Fuck Up. Like, seriously, like, just, and then somebody dared me to do it, and I'm like, all right, I'll do it. And it just flew out. And the beautiful thing, especially, I love Dr. Joe's work so much. I'm very involved with the organization, is that he really breaks down the science of why and how we're living, and really breaks down the brain. The brain, our brains were made to survive. Like, we're the descendants of people that had to, like either die from some horrible disease that there was no cure, or they were eaten by a predator. So we have a built-in system that's a survival mechanism, right? And because of that survival mechanism, we gravitate towards news that are about surviving, because we instinctively think, well, if we hear what's going wrong, then we're going to keep ourselves safe, right? That's why we gravitate towards bad news and all that. And the irony is that that same mechanism that's protecting us is what's killing us, because we're craving that news, that stress, but then the stress is the one that
Mhm.
gets us. So it's fascinating, to say the least. So the book, in many ways, it's almost like these life hacks on, like, okay, we got to do our part to not inject more stress in our
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah. So for those who are like, wait a second, this title, this is a spiritual book, Shut the Fuck Up Method. For those who are like, what is this about? Do you want to share a little bit about what this book is?
Yes, coming out June 8th on Amazon. So, yeah, it's called the Shut the Fuck Up Method: Silence Your Way to the Life of Your Dreams. And I think I love, it's a counterintuitive approach, because we definitely reached a level in our society and culture where it's like, speak up, don't silence, speak up, ask for, push force. And this is actually inviting you to kind of do the opposite, and and I'm very specific about letting people know that it's not about repression, it's about mindfulness. If you're having an issue either with a person, or you get the wrong order, you don't just go, oh, I'll just won't say anything. Like, go to the source, right? Ask, tell your waiter that he got it wrong. What I'm talking about is, like, when you walk away and you say, like, oh, I always get the wrong order, this place sucks, no one listens to me, it always happens to me, because that's where we energetically keep those patterns alive in our
Mhm.
life.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting, right? Because when you're on the spiritual path, at some point you have to recognize that I have to turn from the external inward, which requires we listen, right? You were saying our world is all about speaking our truth and saying what we want. Okay, there is validity to that, of course. And we are creator beings, and we create through our words, right? Whether it's written, spoken, whatever. And our thoughts create. But most people are not really aware of their thoughts, or they're not really aware of what they're creating, right? It's what you're saying. Oh my God, well, this happened, but then I'm running a story on it, rather than recognizing that it's all perfect, but we need to sit and listen because most people are not listening, never mind to each other, to ourselves, right? And one of the skills you
Yeah.
need on the spiritual path is to be able to just be with self, to listen, to recognize what is my soul telling me, what is my internal guidance. And for sure, we're always running stories. The ego has a very tricky way, this same thing that keeps us alive, right? This part of our brain, which is beautiful. Like if, if we're on a savannah and there's a lion coming after me, it's a great thing that I know that I'm a separate self, right? That I have a body and that I can run, right? The ego does keep us alive. But this
Yeah.
belief in separation is not truth. And this belief that you are different from, and we let our egos go nuts with the stories and the telling, right? The example you gave, I think, is a beautiful one. You're at dinner, you receive a wrong meal or one you did not ask for, right? That's what happened, right? But it's all those other things that keep that story going. I'm this, nobody listens to me, I'm worthless, da 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 da. We run these narratives forever and we let the ego go completely apeshit in our minds until we bring awareness to it. And when we can recognize that as the observer, oh, wow, look at this. I'm running this story. I said this, I'm running these beliefs, but that's not my true essence. That's the ego doing its thing. So I'm assuming this is what the book is really helping you to
Yeah,
access.
no, absolutely. Yeah, no, you're right. It's a moment to pause and really don't be aware of the patterns that we run. And by being aware of the patterns that we run, then we can actually transform
Mm-hmm.
them, you know. And in my opinion, and these are all things obviously that have worked with me, and I have worked with people that I'm very close to, that I talk to a lot, is meditation is crucial as well. Like when you meditate, your brain is in theta, and that's when you're highly suggestible. So if we have, and it could be a 5 minute meditation practice, try 10 if you can. Do it early in the morning or right before bed when your brain is in theta, you're very suggestible. That it's almost like you're priming the brain, so then the shut the fuck up method can actually activate in you. Yeah, I'm telling you, because it like it will, you will not be, you know what I mean, you won't be as reactive, um you won't be activated from those survival
Mm-hmm.
tendencies that much, so you'll have a longer pause moment to pause before you become reactive. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with being reactive. Is just if you react, you also want the refractory period, right? That period where you're of the reactivity to be
Right.
shorter. And the more that we combine the practice of meditation and the practice of mindfulness, it really, really does work.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there is a space between stimulus and response. For most people, that space is really short, right? There's reactivity that's happening, as you mentioned. But when we create a bit of space and we're able to observe, when we're able to listen, what we do is we bring consciousness into that. So, okay, the waiter brought me this food. I'm not going to yell at him, right? There's a moment, or whatever. My spouse triggered me, or my friend didn't answer my call, or whatever the case is. Um, and really, on this spiritual journey, no matter how you cut it, no matter what tradition, right? um, it is in this bringing of conscious awareness to our patterns, our belief systems, our thoughts, our traumas, whatever it is that we're carrying, right? It's in bringing conscious awareness to things that we actually have access, right? If I can observe and know, oh, wow, I'm running this belief about my worthiness, that I'm not worthy of this or that or the other thing. Well, beautiful. Then you have access to make another choice if you wish. But if you don't have access to it, if you're not even aware of it, and that's just running you ragged in the background because you've never listened to it, you never had the opportunity to just be with it, well, it's just going to run your life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Going back to what you were saying about the knowing that we're separate from that tiger chasing us, the fight or flight survival system is great when there's a dinosaur chasing you. And when you go on into when you're on fight or flight, your brain goes on beta, which is high alert. Your pupils get dilated, your immune system goes down, because it's almost like a computer, and then you focus and you run. But then after 15-20 minutes, when you're not running anymore, then the system goes back to normal, right? Your brain goes back to either delta or alpha. It goes not as active, and you're back on gracing the field. But the problem is, most people are staying in that high beta 70% of their lives, because of all the triggers that the world constantly has. Our new dinosaur is the news, the credit card bills. What am I going to do with my life? Gaza, anything. I talk a lot in the book about the news. I don't blame CNN or Fox News for what they show their audience. They're in the business of eyeballs, and what brings in most of the eyeballs are stories that are sensational stories, right? Whether it's war or murder. If I'm like the sales guy for CNN, and your Google is going to be like, I need all the numbers to be like this. And I'm going to say, oh, well, that's when we have our murder stories. And then they're going to be like, well, you got to do what you got to do. So I think it's such a business. And I never thought about this, but stress is a business. It's a huge business. It's cancer. It's everything. And again, I'm not coming I'm not coming after anybody here, but like the saving of the body, of the breakdown of the body, is a very profitable business. So I can see why they're doing
Yeah,
it.
no, it's very real. And actually, the opening that I'm seeing here too is there is an antidote to this, which is listening to self and recognizing that you are a divine being with a body that is naturally in wholeness, but that's only if, right, you're aware of where you're placing your attention and aware of what's going on in your belief system. Um, I love that you were talking about epigenetics, and it's such an interesting field right now where we're learning a lot of things. We're really actually understanding about our bodies and the quantum field. So we're now going from science and metaphysics in, a beautiful way, a beautiful blending that's happening, recognizing that our DNA carries lots of codes and lots of things. And as we interact with the world around us, certain things can be activated, certain traumas from other lives, from this life, whatever. Interesting, I found in my work in QHHT with my clients that cancer, and it makes a lot of sense, I think, but cancer is generally rooted in the emotion of anger that is not felt and processed properly. Now, of course, there are other reasons and other things that can trigger certain cells in the body, but the emotion of anger over a prolonged period of time can manifest in
It-
the body.
yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because it is. I just heard that the other day too. That it's been coming to me from there's listen, like, let's say you have a paper due tomorrow, right? Or you're running late somewhere. You're gonna go on a beta, right? You're gonna go
You
into,
got to
like,
get it done.
you gotta get you gotta get it done. You gotta get, I mean, you can't always be like alpha or like theta, like, hey baby. No, you know what I mean? We gotta get into, you gotta fix your house, guests are coming over, right? Nothing wrong with a little beta. It's the hardcore ones, that, like, the anger, that those are the ones that I think really take a toll on the body.
Mhm.
You know, when we get into those states of and it's amazing, because when we work with the narrative of what we have about our life, right? Or you or me, or like Byron Katie says, I love, she says, no two human beings I've ever met. It's my story of me meeting my story of me meeting your story of you, and you have a story of me, and your mom has a story of you, your ex has a story of you, your current one has a story of you, your enemy has a story, your best friend. Which one of them is right? Maybe they're all right. Maybe they're actually seeing those things that are in them. So when I have an issue now with anybody, I actually get excited when I meet somebody that I don't like,
Mhm.
because then I'm like, great. what story am I telling you? Like, I saw you at the gym. You're that person at the gym that never says hi to me. And I see that you say hi to everybody, but I come and it's like you, and then the mind goes, what a dick, or like, what did I do? Like, da, 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 da. And then you can just stop and go, wow, this person, by being the way they are, is actually giving me my emotional autonomy, because it's showing me that if I overcome that environment of wanting to be seen or heard or appreciated by him or her, then I can find my total bliss. So you can start looking at an enemy or somebody that doesn't jive with you as almost like your saviors, because they're the ones that are giving you that gift of like, overcome this environment and have complete peace at your call whenever you want. It's almost like they're taking the crutches away, right? Because it's nice to feel love when everybody's like, oh my god, Cameron, you're so amazing, bring me the one that goes, you're full of shit, right? And feel that peace while they're saying that, and you win.
Yeah. Well, you win because you know and align yourself with the truth of oneness, which is, your natural state of being. But I love definitely what you're saying. The term that I use and teach is catalyst, right? And what you're describing is
Mhm.
this: we live in a world where there are catalysts all the time. Now, the catalyst could be the stress of traffic to work, it could be your partner fighting with you, or it could be just the person that is somehow triggering you because they just are, right? There's this internal, there's an annoyance or an irritation or whatever. And every time a catalyst happens, I mean, people talk about a spiritual path, and look, clearly I'm in the work of supporting people to consciously move through their spiritual path. Spiritual practices are beautiful. Books like your own are amazing and they can really move the needle. But your life is full of spiritual lessons in the form of catalysts or triggers, right? So every time something triggers you or internally there's something going on, it's because and only because that exists in you, right? So if it's that guy at the gym that doesn't look at you, oh, I'm not feeling seen by this person, but also why does it matter if I need to be
I mean,
seen?
clearly, well, let's be honest. Clearly, he's blind.
Maybe,
That's really
or
that's really what's going on.
maybe, or that your energy is triggering something in him that is unconscious, or vice versa. And so in those moments, we're gifted with these catalysts to be like, okay, well, can I come into this moment with full acceptance and love, knowing that everything in divine order is perfect, right? And that something is teaching me something here. This guy who doesn't want to look at me and makes me feel insecure, well, he's not making me feel anything. The only thing he's doing is holding up a mirror to the fact that I have insecurity inside of me, right? And in that moment, to meet that with gratitude of like, wow, okay, thanks for showing me that that's still there. It's a very different way of experiencing the world, but it is actually more aligned with reality and the truth of the universe that we exist in. Our stories and all that bullshit stuff is not reality. They're just the the experiences that we create for ourselves, right? I could go project, oh, he's this, he's this, he's this, he's blind, he can't see me, whatever. But in reality, all that happened was that person didn't talk to you. That doesn't have to mean anything.
And yeah, and it is once we really flex the muscle of really controlling our narrative, and what we're making things mean, um, it's a whole nother world. Where I go really kind of, in the book I do like the shut the fuck up commandments, the 10 commandments, and the first one is like, if thou is gonna talk shit, and I say thou, if thou is gonna talk shit about anyone, thou will not use their name, thou will use my friend. So it's almost like I'm putting a lot of practical ways in which we can start also being responsible for our space, right? Because the thing is like, if you and I have Maria as our common friend, right? And let's say Maria's always, every time we go out, I always pay for it and she's cheap. Like, I can have my experience with Maria, right? But the moment that I tell you about it, right? Like, I'm infecting you with subconsciously something that now you're going to look for. So maybe Maria was never going to be cheap with you because you weren't activated. That wasn't your gig. But the minute that I said it, Now you're gonna look for it, and then you're gonna find it, and then you're gonna be like, "Oh my God, Jorge, you were so right. She's so cheap." So it's like, how can we be responsible for how others occur in others' lives? So how could I not just take care of Maria's reputation, even though it's a little annoying because she's cheap, but now I'm taking care of your experience?
Yeah.
And is that something that we don't think about that?
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that I teach, which is about essentially cleaning up the space, right? And like being responsible for the spaces between us, right? And that's what you're talking about, your relationship with Maria, my relationship with Maria, where we combine together. I wonder who this Maria woman is. But anyway, like a lot of people
That's
are not consciously responsible for the spaces between ourselves, and so we create all kinds of drama and issues. I mean, my goodness, go look at like most workplaces, right? Go look at most businesses and see the messes that we create because of the stories that we're projecting, and because we're not truly um, being responsible for the spaces between ourselves.
Yeah, I bring up a lot of examples of workspaces. You know, it's like, let's say you and I have this nightmare boss, and we like to, get by the water cooler and bitch about him and complain. Like, then it's almost like, real. Ask yourself, if you knew that describing your boss as a nightmare keeps him as a nightmare, would you still do it? Like, really, would you still do it if how we're describing the world is how we experience it? Would you be more mindful of the description of the world? And I just think, like, these things are so automatic, people haven't taken a moment to really think that, because guess what, it could be a funny conversation between you and I for 15-20 minutes. We can laugh about it. We've created camaraderie and relatedness over it, but we're paying a really high price for it.
Yeah, totally. And mostly in our vibration, right? And what we're
Mhm.
creating in the world, because we are creator beings that are constantly co creating with the universe through our thoughts and then our emotions and subsequently our actions, right? And so when we're doing that, when we're creating this reality for ourselves, that this person is blah, 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 right? We're turning our attention, our creator consciousness to something. Well, that's the reality that we're creating. And the truth is, we can create whatever reality we want, but we just have to turn our attention to a different thing, right?
Yeah,
And
the things that we want.
to include the things we actually want. Hey there, I'm excited to share something new with you. Introducing Beyond the Show, our new monthly live connection calls where you can continue the conversation. If you're loving the insights and stories shared on the show and want to dive deeper, these live monthly sessions are your chance to engage directly with me, my guests, and with fellow listeners. Each month, we'll gather inside the Path and Purpose community for a real-time discussion and Q&A with one of our featured guests. It's a great opportunity to explore topics further, ask questions, and be part of a community of like-minded souls. Interested in joining us? Head over to yourpathandpurpose.com/community to become part of the free community and get access to these exciting live calls. Can't wait to see you there and to continue the conversation. So, okay, you mentioned that your spiritual work has been more of a, did you use the word hobby? No.
Kind of, yeah. Like, it's been my personal passion, but I've never really passion, but I never thought about it. I think it was a combination of things, that I think my parents passing, really getting into Dr. Joe's work, that kind of connected all the dots, because I love Dr. Joe's work so much, and at the same time, I can see how it could be a little too scientific, and I think, like, friends of mine, when I try to explain it, they get lost, right? So what I kind of did is I created like a very, for lack of a better word, dumbed down version of, like, just explaining like the core of a lot of these, the science behind it, right? Like what you said before, it's like how grateful we should all be that now we can trace it to, like, quantum science, like, if it's like the atom and the electron, as an observer, when you're staring at these electrons, they're there, but when you look away, they disappear. So everything is floating around in the quantum as a possibility, right? Like if I think Cameron's a pain in the ass, I can think it, right? Cameron, like it's Cameron. In the minute that I tell Maria he's a pain in the ass, I just locked in your particles. So now you have to start appearing that way because as the observer, I locked you in. So it's like observation turns out to be a very active practice. So what are we observing and what are we declaring about what we're observing?
Hmm. Yeah, because that creates our reality. And I like what you mentioned too about the co-creation of it, because as you observe it, that's how it's going to show up for you,
Yeah.
even in a
So,
person, in a job, in a whatever.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
So yeah, and to wrap up what you were saying, so I mean, the book's coming out, and I really am excited to see how it all unfolds. I love talking about this stuff as you do, and I would love just to keep getting opportunities to do that and really turn it into something amazing that could help a lot of people for sure.
totally. Well, that's why we're having this conversation. So I want to ask you a couple of things about purpose, but I also want to deviate slightly because, as I understand it, you've done a lot of things professionally in your life. You own a company, yes, or maybe
Hmm.
multiple companies. Actually, I know this.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe.
you've correct directed film. You've done a bunch of things. So I'm just curious how you understand the idea of living your purpose and what does that look like? Obviously, this book, you felt called and inspired to write it, but maybe sharing a little bit about your journey, how things have unfolded in terms of purpose for you.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of interest, and I think that I I'm a very creative person by nature. So I think that when I see something that touches me, that gets my curiosity going, I figure out a way to do it. It's like I wanted to do stand up comedy. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna get up and do it, and I did it. And I did like 50 shows, and I did the comedy store, the Laugh Factory. I still do it. It's fun, but something goes, okay, I did it. I'm done. Or whatever it is. I think that it's almost like why not give it a shot and do stuff. I think that obviously a lot of people I think tend to be a little confused about what I do, right? Because they're like, so what are you doing now? I feel like I'm in like art school or something.
Like,
And
Jorge, your
it's
brand is all over the place. What do you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
do?
yeah, like what are you doing? You're like cracking jokes here and there. And I used to kind of, I think I used to have a lot more of an issue with it because I used to be like, well, I want to do different things, and it's if you don't get who I am, that's not on me. But I do feel that I'm very blessed that I've been able to just act on my creative impulses, and at the same time figure out a way that I can support myself always,
Mhm.
and really I have a knack for connecting and making deals happen, whether they're celebrity endorsement deals or TV shows. I'm very involved in media. I've always been involved in media, so I actually I just sold another TV show that very soon I'll be saying where, but it's pretty exciting. So I think this book is just another part of one of those creative self expressions that are part of my purpose. I can't say like, oh my God, this book is it. This is my legacy. I mean, this is definitely a big part of my legacy. It combines all those years of personal work that I've done. And I'm so happy that I finally found a way to put them in an outlet, and I think I just finished recording the audiobook. I'm so loving this ride, and it hasn't even begun in a
Mhm.
way. And I think because I have all these relationships in entertainment and media, I think things are going to be getting really exciting. So I think that I've always lived. I've been very blessed that I've always lived a life of purpose. When I turned 12, I moved to the United States from Venezuela, and my parents were supposed to come the following year, but they didn't end up coming. but I wanted to move to the U.S. All my cousins lived in Miami, my grandparents, my uncle. So I loved Miami, the U.S. But I was raised by my grandparents, and they were pretty old, and they didn't. I was the only 12-year-old without a curfew, and I loved it. I've craved in freedom, and what is money at the end of the day, right? Money is freedom, and when you're a 12-year-old with no curfew, you're the richest kid in the world because you have all the freedom in the world. So I think that I've been very blessed that I've always created my own schedule and created my life, and I thrive on it. And I think that that will continue to be my purpose.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a really important thread about following your passions, right, as they present, and in that, allowing that to express through you, because that is kind of our ultimate purpose. But I also really love you used a word that in all of my interviews has not been spoken yet, which is the idea of a legacy.
Yeah.
And when we talk about living with purpose, I teach about living in alignment with our purpose, because some people, when they hear that, think it's this thing I have to do. I was born for this one single thing. And while that could be true for some people, for most people, that's not the case. But we can learn to live in alignment with our purpose. We can learn to live in alignment with the expression of our being, right? And in all the ways in which that happens. Um, but I really like what you brought up about legacy. So I'm curious if you want to explore that a little bit, in terms of purpose and legacy, this idea of something that you leave behind, maybe.
Yeah, I think my mom was a very spiritual woman, and no harm, no foul. I think obviously her and my dad left when they were supposed to. I'm in complete alignment with the laws of the universe, and as you know, like Einstein said, and energy doesn't die, it just transforms, so I do believe like in this kind of field that's all energy, and eventually whether I'll see her or not in whatever form we had together, I don't really think so, but maybe. But I do think her legacy was in many ways what I'm continuing, and because she spoke about writing a book, but she never got around to do it, and I think I want to take her passion for spirituality and personal work to the next level, and continue her legacy because she was the most important person in my life. She died in my arms in 2022, and it was a super painful but beautiful journey. And I'm so blessed that I was able to do it, that we were able to be together, and everything we went through. So I want to continue her path in many ways, make it my own, but
Yeah, of
mix it up.
course. Yeah, it's an expression of your soul's being on this planet, right?
Yeah.
Um, Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. On this, as we close this episode, I wanted to ask you one final question. What do you think it means to live with purpose?
To live with purpose is to honor your creative powers, to really honor what your soul is either quietly or loudly telling you to try, and to not let the norms of your culture or society hold you back. And it doesn't need to look like you are going to make a career out of it, but at least as a self expression. I
Mm,
think that's what living with purpose is.
beautiful. And if all else fails, just shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, shut the fuck
First and foremost, that will help you get there. Yeah.
up. And yeah, and shut the fuck up about your limitations, and looking at the world as not right and not coherent. That's where I invite you to shut the fuck up.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Jorge, so much for this time together today. I've really appreciated our conversation.
No, likewise, man. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. And if you guys would like to connect with his work, you're welcome to find links to it in the show notes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
A heartfelt thanks to you for tuning into this episode. I'm Dr. Cameron Martin, and it's been an honor to support you on your path to self-discovery. As you reflect on today's conversation, remember that the journey toward living and leading from your soul's purpose is ongoing. You're never alone in it. Until next time.